Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the content patch for the 5th of June 2015. My name is TotalBiscuit with today's gaming news and comment. Coming up in the show, Fallout 4 has been officially announced, Infinite Crisis will be shutting down in August, and Hearthstone is introducing hero skins. All this in the OC Remix track of the day is coming your way right about now. In a move that surprises nobody ever, Fallout 4 has been announced, and it has been announced alongside a trailer, which appears to include in-engine footage of some description. The only thing we really know about it is that it's going to be focused on an area of Boston. We know nothing about the gameplay or anything along those lines, so really there's actually not an awful lot to discuss, and I imagine that the majority of this information is going to be revealed at E3, as Bethesda will be hosting their first E3 conference and on-stage presentation. A lot of hype surrounding this. It's not that I don't understand the hype. Fallout is a very well-loved franchise, and I'm one of those people that really likes Fallout. I mean, I played Fallout 3 all the way through. I played a lot of New Vegas. I was disappointed in the ending of Fallout 3, as I think many people were. Thankfully, it was fixed by DLC. And I have no doubt that I will play and enjoy this one as well. But really, there's nothing to see as of yet. In fact, the only thing that we really saw in the trailer was some surprisingly dated graphics assets. And as usual, we seem to be running into the same good old Bethesda problem, whereby their animation assets are just horribly subpar. I don't know why it is that Bethesda hasn't been able to iron that out as of yet. That said, it is of course unfair to judge the game based on pre-release material, and in fact it's maybe even a little bit refreshing to see stuff come out that is not going to suffer an inevitable downgrade by the time that it reaches launch. In fact, it doesn't look that much better than New Vegas. It's certainly an improvement, there's no doubt about that. I'm not going to claim it looks the same, that's ridiculous. New Vegas is several years old now. It's certainly a little bit more impressive, but it looks like they are using the same engine that Skyrim is using, and that there's quite a lot of work to be done in order to make that game look like it was produced and released in 2015. I honestly don't really care that much, but it's certainly noteworthy in an age where we have trailers indicating that the game is going to look way, way better than it actually does. Again, a little bit refreshing, but you can still criticize the fact that it looks a little bit dated. No doubt there'll be a lot more to discuss once we get around to E3 time. The only thing that I can say is that I really hope that Bethesda has improved things like their storytelling, their questing, and the memorability of their characters, because Lord, they are not good at that. It's the same thing that I said about Skyrim, the Elder Scrolls series in general, as well as Fallout 3. You make amazing worlds, like you make some of the best open worlds in the business, but you fill them with things that are not interesting. Uninteresting characters, uninteresting questing, and writing that is frankly subpar. So that's really why I think a lot of people enjoyed New Vegas more, because it was simply a better told story with more interesting characters and more interesting quests. There's no point in having a wonderful world to explore if everything you run into is go and collect me 10 potatoes. I'm not interested in that. I'm hoping that they are able to improve in some way. That was the biggest gripe that I had, outside of the ridiculous ending for Fallout 3, which completely threw everything that you'd done up to that point out of the window. So here's hoping they don't repeat that particular mistake. In a surprisingly short message over on the Infinite Crisis website, posted by Anonymous, because I assume nobody wanted to take ownership of this, there has been an announcement that the DC Comics themed Dota-like Infinite Crisis will be shutting down on August the 14th. The game will continue to run up to that time, and Steam customer support will be providing refunds for those that purchased either the starter pack or the elite pack. There does not appear to be any other refund provision in place for those that bought things directly through the in-game store, and the rest of the message is simply a thank you, claiming that it was a difficult decision, and well, that, as they say, is that. No reasoning given whatsoever. Well, I think that we know why, don't we? It's a game that entered a market that is frankly dominated by a few titles. In this order, League of Legends, Dota 2, and then Smite. Those are the three big boys in the genre, with LoL and Dota 2, of course, being a lot larger than Smite, but Smite continuing to be very successful. Everything else is really struggling to try and hang on to a player base. A recent example of that would be Sins of a Dark Age, which had its highest player base ever when myself and Strippin made videos on the game, but the player base rapidly dwindled once again, and at the time of recording has a grand total of 150 concurrent players. It's not the first Dota-like or MOBA game, whichever you prefer, that we've seen go down this path. In fact, we saw Dawngate, which to me was much more of a disappointment, die in the beta stages. It never got out of beta, and that was really disappointing because that game actually made an effort to innovate. Whereas, I've got to say, Infinite Crisis really didn't. It relied heavily on its license. It barely innovated. In fact, the game modes were extremely similar to League of Legends. All of the mechanics were very similar to League of Legends. There were very few real additions. They lifted a few things from Smite here and there, and that is really all they did. And it shouldn't really surprise too many people that the game ended up failing. And I hope that this is a wake-up call, because plenty of companies are trying to jump on this bandwagon. This genre is nigh on impenetrable. It is already dominated. The people that are winning the genre and have the lion's share of the player base are already in place. We have one more competitor entering the fray in terms of Heroes of the Storm, and even Heroes of the Storm is struggling to get a large player base. It's doing okay, but compared to Dota and League of Legends, it's not even close, and it probably never will be. And bear in mind that that's a game that actually tried to innovate. It stripped away a great portion of the game. It took away a lot of the mechanics that are viewed by some people as a barrier to entry. And it put in some new interesting stuff, some very objective-focused gameplay. Plus, of course, you've got the popularity of Blizzard's IP. But outside of that, how on earth do you break into this genre? So why was Smite effective? Why did Smite manage to pull it off? I think there's a couple of reasons. One, it created a third-person Dota-like game, which of course at the time really wasn't a thing. The only other game doing that was Monday Night Combat, which wasn't very successful for a bunch of different reasons, unfortunately. That's a shame, because I kind of like that game. And it also offered a very fair business model, whereby you can buy all the gods and all the future gods for one set price, which is fantastic. What that means is that people are less afraid of starting a new game like that. And I think that free-to-play games have an inherent, ironic, I suppose, barrier to entry, in that while they're free and there's no reason not to try them, you know that you have a mountain to climb when it comes to acquiring all the content. And more to the point, if you leave your existing game, then the sunk cost fallacy kicks in. And you think to yourself, well, I spent so much time, and I maybe even spent money acquiring all this stuff for my account. I can't leave now because it would be a waste. It's so hard to break in. Smite managed it, and let's be honest, you know, Smite is still a very unique game in comparison to the other two big leaders in the market. Infinite Crisis was not. It was League of Legends, essentially, with DC heroes, and I like to differentiate games. I really do. I like to look at the mechanics and say, look, there are some differences, but there were very few in Infinite Crisis. Very few. There were a couple. I mean, the idea that you could capture a couple of objectives in order to weaken your opponent's base and kind of like call down an orbital cannon, and also you could throw cars at people, but outside of that, it was essentially identical, and it didn't innovate anywhere near enough to get people interested. It relied far too much on its license, and it's not enough. You can't rip people away from games they've spent hundreds of hours on unless you do something very, very different or you offer a very fair business model. And Infinite Crisis did neither of those things. It's indeed the same kind of fear that I have for Heroes of the Storm eventually. Yes, it's innovated in a great many ways, but its business model is really one of the worst in the industry. Heroes are extremely expensive in that game. Skins are extremely expensive. The talent gating is infuriating. There's no option to buy all the heroes for one set price that's actually reasonable. So even for me, who has quite a lot of disposable income, I still don't really like paying $9.99 for a hero. I've got to say, I think that's too much, and we'll get a little bit onto that topic later when we talk about this new Hearthstone skin thing that they're doing. But I'm not surprised. I mean, obviously I'm a little bit sad because Turbine's had some pretty bad luck in the past few years. I think they're a pretty good developer. It's a shame that they're getting a rough ride like this, but ultimately, did anyone actually expect this game to succeed? I don't necessarily think that they did, and it's not surprising to see it go down in flames. I really would like to see anyone that's attempting to get into this genre do something a little bit different. Please, please. I like this genre, and I'm not necessarily willing to jump into games that don't innovate in a big way, because I don't see the point of getting on the treadmill once again, trying to grind out heroes and playing the same sort of gameplay when I could just be playing something else. And that's not to mention the fact that the learning curve is there. When you're learning a new Dota-like or MOBA game, you have a great deal of time which you must invest in order to even get semi-good. I put over 300 hours into Dota, and I suck. Like, you've got to put 1,000 hours in just to even be okay at that game. So, if you expect me to do that, then you can't possibly expect me to do it with multiple games. That's just crazy. So long Infinite Crisis, and again, I hope this is something of a warning to other developers. Please, if you are going to enter this genre, do something. Either innovate in your business model or innovate in your game mechanics. Preferably both, but for God's sake, don't clone what's already been done. This genre is perhaps too iterative, and as a result, we are seeing a consumer, not so much backlash, but consumer apathy as a result. And I don't mind iterative genres. You can get great things out of iteration, but this is too much. And in combination with the business model problems and the sunk cost fallacy, these games are having a lot of trouble getting and retaining players. I mean, I imagine Sins of a Dark Age is next on the chopping block with the player base the size that it is, which is kind of sad because they innovated a little bit, but possibly not enough. And finally, Blizzard has announced hero skins for Hearthstone, which will start at $9.99 and will reskin your hero to look like something else. The first hero to be announced is Magni Bronzebeard, which will be replacing the default warrior skin. There are also additional things like custom animations and custom sound files, but outside of that, it affects the game in no way whatsoever. The new heroes will be $10 each and will also come with a bonus card back. Inexplicably, a lot of people are very upset about this, which is odd, extremely odd, because this is purely cosmetic. Purely. I mean, it doesn't affect the game in any way, shape, or form. No way whatsoever. And I think a lot of the consternation comes from the refusal of Blizzard to implement certain other features, like, say, additional deck slots. This has been a point of contention for a long time. Blizzard has said they don't want to make things too complicated, so apparently 9 deck slots is the magic number. I fundamentally disagree, and I think it's frankly insulting to the intelligence of the player base to believe that somehow if you had extra deck slots, they would confuse the players. How exactly? It's more confusing to have to manage more than 9 decks when you have to import them from text files and rebuild the decks every time you want to use them. It also discourages creativity and experimentation, and I can't see why you'd possibly want to discourage that, because that's the kind of way that you make the ladder more interesting and also get people to buy more bloody cards in your game, and that's that's what you're trying to do, right? You're trying to sell more cards, I assume. But having said that, and I'm firmly on the side of people that want more deck slots, especially me, I make loads of crazy decks. This is not an either-or situation, a zero-sum game. It's a false dichotomy. You really think that the art team is responsible for the coding behind additional deck slots? Because they aren't. They got nothing to do with that. The implementation of this has nothing to do with the implementation of extra deck slots or any other features. It's not taking away from that development time, so please stop pretending that it does. It makes you look so very, very silly. I understand. I get the frustration behind Blizzard's boneheaded refusal to implement additional deck slots. It's, again, intellectually insulting. It's a pain in the ass. But these are cosmetic skins. Who the hell cares? You don't have to have them, they don't affect the game in any way, shape, or form, and this is the best form of monetization for a game like this. I mean, more cosmetics, the better. I'd like to see things like card packs become a little bit cheaper, or additional gold be put into place for those who don't have all the cards, which are, of course, the vast majority of the player base. I have all the cards, but I would like to see other players be able to get the cards easier than they currently can. The thing is, though, I think that the price is a little bit off, and Blizzard has been doing this a lot. I think it's certainly far more problematic in something like Heroes of the Storm, where heroes cost like $10 each at times. That's ludicrous. Cosmetics being as expensive as they are, it always almost seems like Blizzard makes things twice as expensive as they should be. I was on a stream a couple of days back with Jesse Cox playing Heroes of the Storm, and we looked at the sale, and a bunch of skins were 50% off, and we said, you know what? That seems like it should be the regular price. $5 for a skin, that seems reasonable. That seems okay. $5 for a hero skin in Hearthstone, yeah, sure, I can dig that. $10? That's starting to get a little bit silly. Not to mention the fact that, of course, if you play a lot of different heroes, if you want all 9 skins, you're paying $90. $90! I know it's optional. And again, I don't think there's really too much room to complain about this. I mean, this is first world problems in its purest form, but it does seem to me that Blizzard is consistently overpricing things. I mean, they were selling $25 mounts in WoW, for God's sake, but it would appear that their business model works because plenty of people buy those bloody mounts. So they are pricing it in such a way that the market will bear. I still think they'd probably sell more than double the number if they halve the price, but I'm not Blizzard, and I don't have access to those numbers, so I am just speculating. Regardless, can we please calm the hell down about this? There is really no need whatsoever to spread this false dichotomy that this feature is somehow preventing Blizzard from putting in things like extra deck slots. No, that's design philosophy, and if you want to argue about that, I am 100% behind you. Because it's ridiculous. It's absolutely absurd. But skins? Come on, the art team is not doing the programming. That's not how development works. Alright folks, that's me done for the day. Thank you very much for watching the content patch, but before you go, I'd like to give you the OC Remix track of the day. It will of course be the last track from 7 songs for 7th Saga, and it will go by the name of Wizard. You can download it for free in the description below this video, and I'll see you next time.